In this video, we're going to draw some characters from Zelda Breath of the Wild. What I want to do is explore how we might draw stylized characters using the concepts of constructive anatomy and a good drawing foundation. Specifically the Zora, because they've got some interesting facial anatomy. We're going to take that and combine it with constructive anatomy, ideas that you might find in a book such as Andrew Loomis's Drawing the Head and Hands. This is where we try and break things down and look at structure, symmetry, and how we use primary form to construct the face. This stuff works even if you're drawing stylized characters, obviously, and that's what I want to do in this video. Anyway, this should be a fun one, so let's jump in and get started. Alright, welcome to the Drawing Codex. So I've got here my layout that I'm going to play around with. Again, I think this character, the Sidon character, specifically of the Zora, is a really sort of fun character to draw. I might have a full body little demo coming up later on of this character, but yeah, super fun idea. Basically, characters with fishes for heads. Now, this is from the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Creating a Champion book, and that's kind of what I'm using for reference. Tools for today are going to be a Blackwing matte pencil. I'm going to have a kneadable eraser, and I also have a little sort of skull that we might use as reference. These are from anatomytools.com, as are the skeletal model and the écorché model that I'm often using. Now, the idea is to look at constructive anatomy theory that you might find in a book such as Drawing the Head and Hands by Andrew Loomis. And this is where what we're thinking about is the skeletal structure of the head. What are all the landmarks of the head? How do we build it up, essentially? And this is good not just for, being able to draw a head, but it's more specifically really good when you need to draw it from different angles. Because if we break the head down from different angles like this, then it gives us a really good framework to rotate the head. And again, make sure that even if we got really sort of crazy different anatomy, that we can still understand how that is actually structured in 3 dimensions. These are techniques that I use all day, every day in my own work. So typically I'm doing comic books, although I have frequently worked as a concept artist in video games. And again, often what we're having to do is design different characters, draw them again and again, and I really found that a lot of the constructive anatomy principles helped me a lot. This is also exactly the same set of ideas that I would use for the current work that I'm doing. In this case, I've been working on the Star Atlas Core series of comics and graphic novels, and in this case, these are books that I've written and drawn, and I've got to draw a wide variety of different alien characters with different anatomical features. There's robots, and again, I think this idea is something that is really, really useful and, important to get sorted. Again, I use exactly the same ideas, and again, these are things that I'll sort of demonstrate to draw, even animal characters, these little sort of punab alien characters that we've got here. Again, male, female characters. A lot of this also has helped me to develop and push my own style. So understanding how to modify style and make sure that, again, even sort of the alien characters and the human characters feel as if they're kind of living within the same world. Now, if you want to learn a little bit about how I do what I do in the line and color style, you can check out my free quick start guide. It's aimed to get you up and running quickly in Photoshop, developing your own simple, reliable line and color style and process. That quick start guide is free. The link will be in the description. You get all of the PSDs and brushes and things that I, typically create my work with, and everything that you would need to kind of complete an image similar to the one in the quick start guide. Anyway, check it out if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, so let's get started with the drawing. Now, this is the typified Loomis head drawing method that you probably see sort of floating around YouTube. Again, I've made a bunch of videos on this talking about the fact that, in my opinion, this is just one sort of aspect of constructive anatomy. It's a very well sort of illustrated and broken down concept, but again, these are just ideas that are really relevant to all drawing, and you can break down anything like this. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I can think about how we might relate these ideas to a standard head, but really, again, what I want to do is show how we would draw this character using those same ideas. So one of the things you can kind of see with this character is that if we kind of just take the basic idea, and again, we'll draw a couple of different angles to really get our sort of mind around it. If we kind of look at what's happening, we've got a similar kind of base that I think is good to start with, because this is dealing with something where we kind of have our human face under there. And it is a very mangarized face, I would say. Sorry, I don't even know whether that's a word, but basically it sort of means that we've got these kind of quite big lips. So we have quite a large mound of the face. Instead of a nose, though, right, we kind of have the beginning of the protrusion. So just to back up a little bit, what I'm sort of starting with and I'm trying to find is just where that initial human skull would be. Now, there's a couple of interesting little bits and pieces that I think make this character unique. One is that the neck is very long. So if we look at the distance proportionally from the bottom of the chin to kind of where the clavicle would be, right down there, it's pretty long, right? It's almost like, you know, one sort of head, right? So this neck is really quite long. And I think that's going to help us a little bit. Now, we can put in some anatomy there to kind of help us if you want, but you see that based on the style that you see in Breath of the Wild, we're not really getting any of that secondary anatomical structure, which is, again, a good indication of the level of stylization we have. But we still have a little bit of the mouth and the chin. So what I'm trying to do from a constructive anatomy point of view is find structure first. And secondly would be to find center. Now, center line is the thing that is really going to help us here when it comes to placing all of these features. We've got a range of different features that need to be placed, and the center line is the thing that here we will see if I move this over a little bit. Oh, yeah, you can see this right over here. This is a really sort of helpful side view that's showing us what's going on. So the center line is what defines, and again, what I'll do is I'll draw from the side what's happening here, or at least how I'm thinking about it. So we have a normal head, we have a long neck, right? You can see from a proportional standpoint. Again, it's almost like one head down. All right. Obviously, we're going to have some shoulders and stuff there. Now, if we were to divide this up normally, again, what we'll get is the brow. Right? If we imagine there was a nose there to begin with, we would have something like this. Right? So if there was a nose to begin with, again, we're going to have one proportion, two proportions, yeah, and roughly three proportions. And 1, 2, 3. And we're going to see a mouth here. Chin. All right, so this is kind of what we're expecting to see. Something like this. Now, obviously, there's a number of modifications to this here. One is that we're having that slightly more stylized look. And so what's going to happen is, even though, again, this character in particular has quite a strong chin, right, that does come out, we are probably going to see more of an angle here because it has that kind of more sort of childish, sort of typical, you know, what Western people tend to define as sort of that manga look. So that's sort of what we're seeing from the side. Now, instead of a nose, what happens is this just goes straight up, and you can see that from the side view. And it actually comes out quite a way this way. And then we basically have a giant fish stuck on the head. So if we think about where the eye would be, this is where the brow would be normally. And the eye is kind of there. It's kind of in the same kind of spot, but not quite. So we've got this, comes up here. And in this instance, I think that this part of the fish underneath really is coming up. And what we're seeing is this bit at the side, which is in many ways coming up there. All right. So that's kind of what we're seeing from the side. Boom. And then we've got some other shapes there, and this thing, this side thing that is coming pretty much and covering up everything there. And that is coming down well into the chest area. So again, that's a good sort of example of what I'm trying to do there. Now we've also got this fin here. And there's obviously some other costume details there that are going to play a role. But that's basically what's happening from the side. Now, how does that work in 3 dimensions? Well, that is the trick, right? And that's where the constructive anatomy is so useful. So what I'm trying to find is this center line. And first, again, I'm trying to find it kind of more or less as if it was a normal human. Again, what we can try and think about is where the eyes would normally be. Again, spacing them a little bit apart, making them a little bit bigger. This is a cartoony world. And what I'm going to try and find is, again, this kind of line here. Because I'm going to have eyes here. And what we're seeing is, if we were to think about what's happening here, we can start to consider how far out this form is going to go. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can think about this. We can try and visualize the dimensionality of this. Right? What does this look like in profile? So what I'm doing there is trying to think about if we were to look at a fish front on, what that is going to be like is more or less a cylinder that I'm looking at front on. And that cylinder is going to have dimensionality, right? And again, what happens for us is that cylinder decreases in size. And here, what happens is it kind of comes to a point. So I'm really trying to find and understand what that is. But again, it's not necessarily just a simple cylinder. What we'll find is if we were to look at that from front on, if we imagine this is the tip here, what we're seeing is we're seeing these kind of hammerhead elements protrude out this way. And this is kind of coming down to that nose point. And then it does seem a lot rounder on the top. So I'm trying to think about what the contours of this would be here, if that makes sense. So we're getting pretty sketchy, but that's all right. Now, one of the things that, again, I need to remember is that I think this fish thing goes way over the top. So the first few times you try and do these constructions, again, it's a feeling out process, because what we're trying to find is the match between, look, where is the structure, and also where are the shapes? Like, do the shapes feel right? So here I've got the mouth. Right, we've got this coming up here. And this is where, again, now that I've got this, it's important to understand the symmetry. Here's my center line. And what I'm going to try and find is, where are these points in space? So I'm trying to find the center here. And this is very similar to drawing a plane. Now, exactly how we do this is a little bit more complicated, and I'll go over it very briefly. But what I'm going to do is demonstrate the rough sort of version of it, where what I'm doing is eyeballing, right? Eyeballing this look. And it's all looking pretty rough now, but we'll hopefully be able to land the plane, I think. Pun intended. So how are we kind of thinking about that? Like, how does that kind of happen? So one of the things that's also important is that obviously these kind of come down, right, and meet this. But I'm kind of thinking of them as plane wings to begin with, because that just helps me consider it. So we're using a very, very simple construction technique there. And what that is that we can consider most things to function in both 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions if we can divide up the geometry well enough. So if we think about this as in 2 dimensions, what you'll notice is if I draw that same thing in 3 dimensions, and I'm guesstimating here, so there's still a lot of roughness to what I'm doing, but what I'm able to do is draw straight lines from point to point that will actually give me some of the spatial relationships. And that's exactly what I'm doing here, and that's exactly what you would do if you're drawing a plane. If you're drawing a plane, and this is again very rough, but if you're drawing a plane, what we're often trying to do is replicate space. So I need to figure out, well, look, how long is this wing, right, for my plane? That's a very simplified plane. Let's make that a little bit, right, more obvious what's going on. So I've got my little plane there. And what we're trying to do is replicate this distance over here. Now, you can basically do that with any of the geometric forms here. The biggest one is going to be the most accurate. But what we're trying to do is replicate that space. So I'm thinking about this space, and what I want to do is replicate this dimension here. And so we simply use this same logic. I've got this point here, which is this point here, and I'm going to draw a line from there to there, bang, until it gets about here. Now this is very rough, so the more you do this with a ruler, the more accurate it's going to be, and that gives me that dimension in space. Now we can use the same thing when we are drawing the plane in 3 dimensions, roughly. So if we imagine we've got the plane here, we imagine that's my center spot. Again, what I can do is roughly draw a line over here, and that will give me a rough indication of that space. Now, there's a couple of things that are really important to understand here. Firstly, this is just a general principle of constructive anatomy and construction drawing in general, which is that if you can measure it in 2 dimensions with straight lines, then you can use those same straight lines in 3 dimensions. If you take this same idea and just make it more and more complicated, what you'll find is that, again, you can do a lot of stuff. Now, this is not the meaning for this demo, but it is an explanation of how I'm sort of thinking about the structure here. Now, the trick to all constructive anatomy, and this is the most important thing to take away, is that this stuff is boring, especially if you want to draw cool characters like this, and that's been my experience of it. But the more of this you do, the easier it is to do what I'm going to do over here, which is kind of just sort of wing it. So what I'm thinking about is just tracking in my mind a couple of things. I'm kind of just trying to feel out the space. I'm trying to think about where the center line is, and I'm trying to match the dimensionality there. And I'm going to do that for a couple of other features that we'll just rough in quickly here. So the other features that I think are going to be really important are these sort of wing things, right? So what I'm going to do is think about where they are. Now, if we look to the side, what we can see is that it feels like they're kind of like about here near the mouth. And they curve up here. And then there's a little line here. And then this comes down. And obviously, boom, this comes up to join there. So we can kind of see from this that probably I want that thing at the back. I'm drawing through, so drawing through, super important. Even though this thing is here, I'm imagining and still looking at where my head is going to be there, because that's going to allow me to trace where the back of this fish is. Boom, boom, boom. So again, I could start constructing the other side at the same time, or typically what we're doing when we are doing this type of constructive anatomy is we're actually going to draw one side and then see if we can replicate that over to the other. So again, the way that we do more guesstimation is by finding center. And what I'm kind of trying to do in most cases is think about where the center line is and where other elements would be on the center line. Now this is where again it gets tricky. We can see how it's been done in the reference. I'm not necessarily 100% convinced that this is going to sort of track and this is going to be where everything is, but it's a pretty good indication because there's a good chance this might have been done from the base 3D model once they have it kind of blocked in. But what I'm going to think about is like, well, where is this bit in space? So it's out from here, and I'm trying to sort of think about where it would be. And also I can think about like where are the points that I need. So I could kind of just try and rough it in, but what we might often find is that I'm going to be limited by my understanding of where does this line here that is going to be the one that kind of touches the chest. So if we look at this again, this is so important. This is the kind of thing that I would often mess up in the beginning when I was learning to draw, is that I would think this is probably too fussy and too much work to get to really think about where this is touching the chest. But in fact, where this is touching the chest is the key element we need to pay attention to. We can also think about, okay, on the other side of that, where does, right, if we think about in an imaginary world, where does this fin connect to on the other side? So if we just sort of trace up there, what's happening on the other side? That's where, again, I can start to come over here. And what I'm actually after, so what it seems like is this does actually come down like that a little bit more, right? We got like a cool shark shape. Boom, get rid of that a little bit. So we draw this, and now what I'm thinking is, well, like, where does that kind of touch the torso? And if I know the center of the torso, I can kind of guesstimate, like, oh, what would be over there, right? It feels like, again, I've sort of got this measured out, guesstimated. Again, doing the same thing here. Now I'm thinking about that, and now I'm thinking about that. And now I'm thinking, oh, where's this line start? It kind of starts over here. It kind of has to come over here, so it's probably going to come around there. Let's transfer this line over there. And now I kind of know, oh, okay. To me, again, you can kind of feel that maybe this is starting to get there. Now, I actually think you can see here, I've kind of figured, like, actually, I think this is going to touch a little bit further over there. So I think we might even be a little bit more over here like this. Now this is where I can start to feel out the space and go like, well, yeah, like this probably has to come a little bit further out here. So I'm just doing guesstimating. If you were drawing a car, you would probably have to do this a little bit better than what I'm doing here because I'm being rough. But I'm also optimizing for shape design, which is also super, super important. Now, we got another few things here that I think are going to be helpful. We've got this necklacey thing, and we can see that this goes all the way down to the bottom kind of here. Don't. I've got another structural element here. And again, this is where also I've drawn the neck, so I can trace this around, right? I can trace this around, which I didn't sort of do there. Now, we get a lot of stuff drawn through where it feels like things are transparent. Again, that's kind of super useful. This is not the finished drawing. This is the construction drawing. Other elements that we can see here is that about halfway up there, we have another division, and this feels like I've gotten the neck even, or it could also be that I think you can see in this drawing, this is a lot higher up. So it could be that that's just higher up than what I've got it. And that gives that sort of regal, high-collared look. And all these things are important to pay attention to. If you're studying design, like studying these things and then kind of understanding like, oh, that's what gives it that feeling. If you try and draw it and it doesn't have the right feeling because you've missed off some of these sort of little structural elements, then again, that can be a really good way to, feel out where other sort of artists are adding these little elements to their designs that are lifting them up and giving more little subtle associations. Okay, what were we doing? We were drawing this. Now we can't see it over there. And I've got a couple of lines here. And it looks like some sort of line there. So what I tend to find anyway is that if I just break these things down and just try and think about where are the proportions, where is the negative space, frequently it's pretty easy to rough these elements in. All right. Cool. Thanks again on that design. Got a little dot there. On this one, it's missing. All right. So there you can see I'm sort of beginning to get the structural feeling for what is happening with this character. Okay, so now it looks a bit dopey to me at the moment. There's a lot of stuff here that doesn't really track, isn't really looking that sort of cool. So what I want to do is I won't sort of erase this one. I'll leave it a little bit like it is, but I'll try and solve the rest of the things, and then I'll do a few little sketches where I'll show you the same sort of ideas but applied a bit quicker, because again, one of the things is that when I was kind of first starting, the real problem with looking at this type of drawing is just understanding that the way we learn it, the way that we get good at it, is probably by drawing more stuff than we need to. And what I found is the more that I do it, the less of it that I actually sort of need to do when I'm actually drawing, let's say. So there's some other elements there. I won't bother with them, except we will try and put in just the indication of where that shark fin up top might be. All right, cool. Again, we've got a few markings here which are worth sort of indicating. And you can see there that I'm sort of missing that second structural element where this is that kind of hammerhead look. Boom. And again, you know, it's not to say this is 100% right. My understanding of the character would evolve. I draw it a few times, get a good understanding of exactly what's going on. Let's sharpen this pencil just a little bit. But yeah, the real trick to understand is there's your conceptual understanding of this stuff, and then there's the application of it. All right, so what do we got? We got this thing that is the nose, and it's kind of coming up here. Now we've got some cool markings on this face. That are a big part of what makes this character feel like the character. So we've got some shadow under there. We've then got this kind of specific eye. And if we think about what's happening here, I can draw a line. Boom. Sort this out. Let's accentuate where we want the lines that we have. And here, what I might do is try and draw a bit more of his sharky grin. But we're still going to try and think about the structure of these lips, because that is indicated pretty strongly in the character design sheet. And this sort of little connection here where we really see this standing in for the nose. Okay. So he's got this little kind of sharky look, where we can see those teeth there. Boom. And then we're going to have lip here. Comes down there. Right, so if we were to shade that in, that's kind of what we would see. And then we'd see something like this. Again, I'm putting a little bit more detail in there than what you would find on the actual kind of art style. And I'm doing that because often what's happening when we're looking at these types of styles is that the artist is thinking about it, or at least if I was drawing it, I would be thinking about where all these different little elements would be. And then, you know, we just kind of draw the ones that we need to. So knowing where they are is super important. Even with cartoony stylized faces, we need to understand where all those different elements are so that we can draw them properly. But anyway, hopefully that gives you an idea for how we might, get that one going. What I want to do next is a couple of quicker sketches from, again, a few different angles. All right, so let's try this again, but we'll do it a little bit faster, and I'll sort of try and describe how I might think about it. I think I'm not going to try drastically different angles, but let's try something that's a little bit more from the front. So I'm going to construct the Loomis style construction again. All right, we've got a boom, boom, boom. Right, character here. There would be a nose here. Right, here's where the eyes are going to be. I'm going to think about the mound of the mouth. Here's where center is. And I'm going to constantly think about where the center line of all these different elements are going to be, including like the cheekbones, the jaw, etc. Now, I'm also going to think about, okay, where would the spine be if it was coming out? Right, it's going to be pretty low. Right, the spine is going to connect at the back of the skull. If we look at our little skull reference, right, it's going to connect about there. That's sort of important to visualize. Again, I've got the character leaning forward a little bit. I've got center. Right here we would have our kind of rib cage if we were doing more construction, but I'm only putting that in there because I think it's often critical to understand how the face and the neck and everything kind of connects, right? So I don't need the nose. What I need is still where the center line is, but I'm gonna try and do a mix, as I kind of say, of thinking about where this line is going to be, because I feel like this is going to really define where that eye goes. And then I'm kind of thinking about where that point is going to be. And I'm doing a mix of, again, just kind of feeling out the line, like doing a bit of this, doing a bit of that. Again, not necessarily super technical because I haven't drawn the character enough to really know where those things go at this stage. Now, again, I keep trying to have to remember that, again, another thing we want to do is try and mass in this fish that goes around the back, right? And to understand like how much of sort of mass of it is up there. So when I'm doing this kind of sketching, frequently this is the sort of thing that I'm doing. I'm doing a mix of feeling it out, adding some structure. I've got the center line, right? Again, these, they really kind of come down and go like this on the Zora. Boom. Now, finding center line. Where is the center line of this thing? It's kind of going up there. It's going above. We can't quite see it. I'm going to have my fin up here somewhere. Now, again, I've got those other elements that I need to find. I've got this element here that's kind of just going to go boom. Right, this is just going to allow me to see the eye under there. And this is another one of those character designs, right, where probably you could draw it from some really dumb positions that don't work. And that's something you find out as you design more and more characters for different things. So I think this is kind of okay here. But again, I'm just trying to find, like you can see that I've got these lines here that were kind of lining up the face, right? I've got these bits and pieces here. That's in my head. The center is in my head, right? And I'm kind of just placing these lines, again, guesstimating. Right, I'm sort of like, well, here's kind of the center, and like, oh, I could place this here. So guesstimation is just building your understanding of where these lines would be, right? So if I think about, you know, centers here, right, this line, this now looks wrong, okay? I'm sort of just guesstimating based on doing many exercises like this, where that goes. Now, that might seem like sort of sloppy drawing, or like, oh, I should do this or should do this. The guesstimation process is not some lower form of drawing or whatever. It is actually the thing that we're often actually trying to build. It is the end goal, is to guesstimate. So again, now I've got the center there. Right, I know where these things are going to go. Right, boom. That's going to come over there. Find that one. Boom. Let's find this over here. Now there could be some dimensionality here. I'm not sure. But I'm just going to sort of think of them as being kind of flat. But again, these little wings could be sort of curving in. And again, that's its own sort of structural concept, right? But again, let's just try to keep things simple. So you see that what I'm doing is trying to push and find points. Right, so finding, oh, that's probably going to go in there. You can see this design. That seems like it's a bit more pointy. Anyway, that'll probably do for our purposes. Boom. So you can see, again, right, I found those points. We're pretty much good to go. Now, where does this fin go on the back? Well, yeah, it's tricky to see because it's sort of changing, but it kind of goes back here. Right, it has that frame there. Now, on the back, yeah, let's draw a bit of this stuff. There's another fin back there, and we've also got along the side, right, let's transfer this and think about, right, what might be happening. Oh, I'm getting some sort of bad tangents there. We'll just tweak that for clarity. And again, these are also constructive anatomy concepts that we're just using all the time. Like, how do we draw that? Oh, that's how we draw that. Boom, boom, boom. All right, now what we notice is this necklacey thing comes up super high here. We've got line down there, line down there. Let's divide it in half, create that structure there. Then we've got two lines this way, we've got some going this way, and depending on which sort of version, we've got this diamond shape here, and that kind of comes over here in a circle. So again, let's put in the circle first, and after that we can make it more specific. Boom, boom. Again, can't see much of that one. Running out of pencil clarity. But, you know, all of this is there now. All of the proportion is there. If I want to add more detail, it's just a matter of going in there and doing more stuff. Now, there is, I feel like, more of a mound at the top. But, you know, I'm not going to finesse this too much. But it can be worthwhile, again, thinking about what's happening with this structure. Because this helps us to visualize what's going on from a sort of form perspective. So what that means is if I was to shade this, my understanding of how these cross sections are going, right, that the form is moving, will really help me. So even if I, you know, end up creating a clean line version of this, it's still super useful for me to have this understanding of what's happening to the form. Boom. All right, center. Now, again, there's something here. Just not going to draw that, otherwise we'll be here for ages. Let's look at how we, again, construct this face, clean this up. So I've got, again, this thing coming down here. I've got the center line of the face. Right, let's just check our center. Again, let's sharpen this pencil, otherwise I'll regret it. Boom. Boom. Okay, got my center line, center line. That seems to be working. Just here we've got, again, those same lips. And that's coming up there. Got the smile line, and we can see, let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger this time. So again, we're going to have the bottom of the lips, then we're going to go down. then we're going to go this way. So again, adding more shading just to help us understand form. If I was rendering this, my style would be very, very much clean line. So we can just see the eye there. Again, we get this kind of point. All right, it goes over there. We get that happening in a similar way. All right, we can put in these shapes here. Boom, boom. So I'll accentuate the outlines by making them a little bit darker just for the purpose of this demo. Normally, if I was doing this, I would, erase a little bit and make this all a bit lighter. But yeah, that's the basic idea. So we got some marks here. Now, I would keep doing this, keep refining my understanding of the character, keep refining my understanding of exactly, what's going on with all of these different little elements, right? Got our little thing up here. Not entirely sure what's happening there, but again, if we needed to draw this thing here, we could start roughing it out, and then boom, boom. Again, let's get rid of that in there. I'm not exactly sure how these things connect up. But yeah, there you go. Boom, boom. Refining these outlines. There we are. So there you have it. Again, hopefully that has been useful. Just a little demo on how we combine constructive anatomy concepts that you might find in a book such as Andrew Loomis's Figure Drawing for All It's Worth, or Drawing the Head and Hands. And again, this is the same stuff I do all day, every day. I think about these concepts as I'm drawing the aliens that I've designed, the aliens that I've kind of part designed based on, other designs that have been done for the comic that I'm drawing, because the comic that I'm drawing, the Star Atlas comic, is based on a video game. So sometimes someone's already designed them and I need to transfer those designs. I don't get to choose. With other designs, I get to start from scratch. But either way, these are the things that I'm thinking about. A lot of these basic structural ideas that, have been around for a long time in architecture, other constructive anatomy, text, etc. This is what makes it easier. And then once I understand the structure, again, I can draw the same thing from different angles, and it's fun, right? I'm not worrying about it. I know how to do it. I know if I make a mistake that I can kind of correct it, because I'm like, oh, that's what went wrong. I'm not redrawing the line all the time. Anyway, hopefully this one's been useful. Let me know if you got any sort of suggestions or advice in the comments about, again, different characters or things to tackle, questions you might have, whether you like this one or not. But other than that, we'll catch you around. Happy drawing.